Samurai Nippon. The day the samurai disappeared.
Shake-in, 5:22 a.m. In a samurai residence in Tokyo's Kojimachi district, a man draws his beloved sword from its sheath. The morning sun reflects off the blade, casting golden streaks across the tatami mats. The man's name is Tanaka Genzo, age 42, a descendant of Aizu clan samurai. He doesn't yet know that this day, March 28, 1876, will be the day when samurai completely vanish from Japan. Nor does he know that this will be the last time he ever holds this beautiful sword. For 700 years, this class had ruled the nation, but a single law containing just 12 characters would erase them from history. This was the Haitorei, the Sword Abolition Edict. But why did the Meiji government need to so thoroughly eliminate the samurai? Who had been the very architects of the restoration? Today, through one man's final 24 hours, we'll uncover the truth behind Japan's most brutal yet necessary social revolution.
But first, please subscribe to our channel and hit that like button. This helps the algorithm show you more videos, perfectly suited to your interests.
Chapter 1. Pre-Dawn Aesthetics. The Morning.
Of the Last Samurai, 500 a.m. In the samurai residential district that still bore traces of old Edo, regular sounds echoed through the air. Sha, sha, shave sound of bamboo sword cutting through air. This was Tanaka Genzo's daily morning practice routine. In 1868, the fourth year of the Keio era, when Genzo lost his homeland of Aizu in the Boshin War, his world changed forever. His father died alongside the White Tiger Brigade. Their family stipend was confiscated, and his family was forced to eke out a living in a corner of Tokyo. Yet he still had his pride, the single sword at his side. The ancestral Aizu kanesada, passed down through generations. The numbers surrounding this sword revealed just how crucial swords were to samurai of the time. Genzo's monthly income was 8 yen, equivalent to about 800,000 yen, $5,300 today. Yet he spent 1 yen monthly just on sword maintenance, supplies 1/8 of his income. This would be like a modern salaryman, spending nearly $650 out of a $5,000 monthly salary on personal grooming. Still, Genzo paid this amount without hesitation, because the sword was his proof of existence. At that time, approximately 1.4 million Shizoku former samurai class lived throughout Japan. About 6% of the population, roughly equivalent to Tokyo's current population, lived with swords as their souls, just like Genzo. They were warriors, but also bureaucrats, scholars, and artists. As the ruling class for over 1,000 years, they carried the culture and order of this nation. But time changed mercilessly. In the Boshin War, the Satsuma Choshu forces' Armstrong cannons scattered the Aizu White Tiger Brigade. Genzo could never forget what he witnessed at the Battle of Toba-Fushimi. A single artillery shell would blow away 10 samurai, comrades falling to bullets the moment they raised their swords. Everyone understood that the age of the sword was over, yet the samurai wouldn't abandon their swords. No, they couldn't abandon them. In Genzo's diary, there's this passage: "A samurai without a sword is like a bird without wings." What meaning is there in life for a bird that has forgotten how to fly? For them, swords were more than weapons. They were identity itself. 600 a.m. Genzo finished his practice and sheathed his beloved sword. As always, he fastened it to his side and headed to breakfast. His wife Oyuki had prepared a modest meal, not white rice, but barley, with just a little miso soup and pickles. It was worlds apart from the lavish meals they once enjoyed in Aizu. "Thank you for your hard work," Oyuki said. Genzo responded with a bitter smile. "Hard work? I don't even have work substantial enough to tire me." Having lost his stipend and receiving no position from the new government, Genzo was effectively unemployed. They survived on his wife's piecework. Neither knew this conversation would be their last breakfast together.
Chapter 2. Behind Government Doors. Cold Calculations and Burning Ideals.
That same morning, 700 a.m., in the Council of State at Kasumigaseki, a final meeting was being held that would determine Japan's fate. The participants were Okubo Toshimichi Ito, Hirobumi and Yamagata Aritomo, men at the core of the Meiji government. A single document on the table was that day's agenda regarding the abolition of Shizoku sword-bearing. Writes the final draft of what would become known as the Haitorei. "Are we really going through with this?" Yamagata spoke heavily. This is tantamount to a declaration of war against the samurai class. Okubo's expression was hard as stone. If we don't, the nation will perish. Before him lay documents filled with terrifying numbers. Annual stipend payments to samurai 15 million yen per year, equivalent to about 15 trillion yen, $100 billion today. This represented 35% of the national budget. In modern terms, it would be like 35 trillion yen out of a 100 trillion yen government budget, going to payments for a privileged class that wasn't working. Moreover, they performed no substantial labor, receiving money based solely on inherited status. With Western powers watching us like hungry wolves, we must redirect this wasted money to military preparations. Or we'll become a colony, Okubo said without hesitation. The choice is clear: lose the nation to sentiment, or steal our hearts and save the country. But they too had once been samurai. Okubo himself had worn a sword as a Satsuma clan retainer. More than anyone, they felt the contradiction of legally abolishing their own roots. We've proceeded step by step, but we've reached the limit, Ito continued, flipping through documents. They had severed lord-vassal relationships with the 1871 abolition of the Han system, changed the land system with the 1873 land tax reform, eliminated the economic foundation with the 1875 commutation of stipends, and made sword-bearing optional with the 1873 datorei. Yet many samurai continued wearing swords. 3 years have passed since the datorei, but its effect has been limited. Even in Tokyo, 70% of Shizoku still carry swords. Yamagata's report defied government expectations. The samurai's attachment to their swords was stronger than imagined. 800 a.m. The moment of decision arrived. Approved. With Okubo's single word, 700 years of samurai privilege would come to an end. Yet no one was celebrating. They were revolutionaries, but also the final bearers of samurai culture. As they left the meeting room, Ito murmured, "Now we two are no longer truly samurai." He too wore a small sword at his side.
Chapter 3. Fateful Noon. 12 characters that change 1.4 million lives.
1000 a.m. The sound of printing presses echoed through the corridors of the Council of State. Kata documents that would change history were being printed one after another. Council of State Proclamation No. 38. The entire law was just 87 characters long. But 12 of those characters, henceforth the Shizoku privilege of sword-bearing is abolished, would transform 1.4 million lives. We hereby announce, an official's voice rang through the silent Council of State. 10:30 a.m., the beginning of the most brutal moment in Japanese history. At that same time, Tanaka Genzo was walking through Kanda's used bookstore district. It was his recent habit to browse Western books and try to understand the flow of the times. His sword made light sounds with each step. These were his final peaceful moments before learning the truth. 100 p.m., the Tokyo Nichinichi Shimbun's printing press began spinning furiously. They were printing an extra edition. The headline was shocking: Shizoku, privilege of sword-bearing completely abolished. Newspaper delivery boys stood on street corners, shouting, "Haitorei proclaimed, samurai swords completely banned." The moment people heard those voices, they stopped in their tracks. Genzo heard that voice at 1:15 p.m. What? He bought the extra edition from a newspaper boy and read the article with trembling hands. Violators will be fined 1 to 5 yen, equivalent to $650 to $3,300 today. It exceeded Genzo's monthly income. When he finished reading, Genzo's world began to crumble audibly. The ground swayed beneath his feet. Cold sweat beaded on his forehead. What does this mean? At that moment, another samurai who had read the same extra edition collapsed to his knees before Genzo's eyes, an elderly samurai of about 70. "I'm so sorry to my ancestors." The old man began crying without shame. 200 p.m. Telegraph offices across the nation transmitted news of the high to every region. Kagoshima, Kumamoto, Kochi, Hagi areas that had contributed to the restoration felt the greatest shock. The telegram reached Saigo Takamori, living in retirement in Kagoshima at 300 p.m. Haitorei proclaimed. Satsuma unrest signs emerging. Saigo read the telegram and remained silent for a long time. Then, gazing at Sakurajima in his garden, he reportedly murmured, "So it has finally come, the true end of the samurai age." Meanwhile, strange scenes unfolded in Tokyo's samurai residential districts. In the afternoon, samurai removing swords from their sides. could be seen emerging from residences everywhere. A merchant's diary from walking through Kojimachi's samurai district contains this description. All the samurai gentlemen were removing their swords. It was as quiet as a funeral. Some were even embracing their ancestral swords and weeping. 4:00 p.m. Genzo headed home. He didn't know what to tell his wife. The sword that had been at his side for 30 years suddenly felt heavy. When his house gate came into view, he made a decision. At least for this last day, he would live as a samurai.
Chapter 4, Evening Decision. Sell your soul or die with it.
5:00 p.m. Heavy silence filled the Tanaka family's living room. After hearing about the Haitorei from Genzo, Oyuki remained speechless for a long time. So from tomorrow you can no longer wear your sword? Oyuki's voice trembled. She understood better than anyone how precious the sword was to her husband. Yes. Genzo's reply was brief, but that single word contained a flood of emotions. The time flowing between them felt abnormally long. From outside came the voices of neighboring samurai, equally shocked. Do we have to sell? No, selling would be shameful for a samurai. But defying the law means fines. What to do with their swords? This was the ultimate choice facing samurai nationwide that day. There were 3 options. First, obey the government and relinquish their swords. Second, ignore the law and hide their swords. Third, die with their swords. In fact, samurai chose all 3 paths. 6:00 p.m. A long line formed at Omiya, a sword dealer at Edobashi. These were samurai coming to sell their swords. But shop owner Omiya Kyubei was perplexed. He lacked funds to purchase so many swords. I apologize, but we must suspend purchases today, Kyubei announced. Unrest rippled through the samurai. They couldn't sell, couldn't keep them truly cornered. One samurai in line suddenly drew his sword. Then I'll commit seppuku here. People rushed to stop him, but his eyes had a wild look. Live with the sword, die with the sword. This is Bushido. At that moment, an elderly samurai spoke quietly. Selling your sword is Bushido. Hiding your sword is Bushido. Dying with your sword is Bushido. What matters is following your own convictions. His words slightly eased the tension. 7:00 p.m. Genzo sat alone, gazing at the Aizu Kanasada. Blade length 2, shaku 3 sun, about 70 centimeters, its beautiful Heiman patterns gleaming in the evening sun. This sword had been passed down through the Tanaka family since the Muromachi period. It was his father's memento, and the inheritance he should leave his son. Father. His 10-year-old son Taro entered the room. Can I have that sword? Genzo looked at his son, innocent eyes gazing at the sword. Taro, do you want to become a samurai? I do. A strong and noble samurai like father. Genzo's heart tightened. In his son's generation, the profession of samurai would no longer exist. Wearing swords, speaking of Bushido, these would hold no legal meaning in the coming era. Taro, listen carefully. Genzo placed his son on his knee. In the coming age, there are things more important than being a samurai. Learning, foreign languages, new technologies. You must acquire these and become someone who supports this nation. Taro tilted his head. But without a sword, you're not really a samurai, right? Even without a sword, if you have Bushido in your heart, you're a fine samurai. Genzo stroked his son's head. Forms may change, but the soul is inherited. That is true Bushido. That night, Genzo made a momentous decision.
Chapter 5, Pre-Dawn Choice. The moment 1.4 million fates diverged.
March 29th, 4:00 a.m., Tanaka Genzo was performing his final sword practice. Holding the Aizu Kanasada, he executed forms passed down through the Tanaka family for 300 years, putting gratitude to his ancestors into each movement. 5:00 a.m., Genzo carefully maintained his sword and wrapped it in white cloth. Then he woke his son Taro. Taro, I'm giving this to you. Genzo handed the wrapped bundle to his son. But you must never draw it. This represents our soul, but times have changed. Your weapon is not the sword it's learning. Taro received the heavy bundle and nodded solemnly. I understand, father. 6:00 a.m. For the first time in his life, Genzo left home without wearing his sword. The lightness at his side felt abnormal. With the familiar weight of 30 years gone, he felt as if he'd lost part of himself. Walking the streets, he saw similar figures of samurai everywhere, former samurai not wearing swords. Their expressions were uniformly complex, showing indescribable faces mixing liberation and loss. However, the impact this change brought to Japan was immeasurable. First, economically. With samurai stipend payments no longer necessary, 35% of the government budget, equivalent to about 15 trillion yen, 100 billion today, was redirected to other purposes. With this funding, the government advanced railway construction, port development, and school building. In modern terms, public investment 3 times the scale of Tohoku reconstruction became possible. An educational revolution also occurred. Knowledge and learning monopolized by samurai became available regardless of social status. Combined with the 1872 education system order, Japan's literacy rate soared from 40% in late Edo period to 80% by the 1880s. This was world-class for the time industrially. Many former samurai began challenging new fields. Iwasaki Yataro of Mitsubishi, Hirose Saihei of Sumitomo, Furukawa Ichibei of Furukawamani Meiji, entrepreneurs, were former samurai by abandoning swords. They overcame psychological barriers to commerce. However, not all samurai could adapt to the new era. In October 1876, the Shimpuren Rebellion erupted in Kumamoto. About 200 Shizoku shouting, "Return our swords," attacked the prefectural office. This was followed by the Akazuki Rebellion, Hagi Rebellion, and ultimately the 1877 Satsuma Rebellion. In the Satsuma Rebellion, 13,000 Satsuma Shizoku, led by Saigo Takamori, attempted final resistance. Many were armed with swords they had secretly kept despite the Haitorei. But before government forces, Spencer rifles, and Gatling guns, swords were completely powerless. In the final battle at Shiroyama, Saigo Takamori committed seppuku with his beloved sword, Haizen Tadayoshi. He was 51 years old. This became the last sword battle by samurai in Japanese history. It occurred 1 year and 7 months after the Haitorei. Meanwhile, many former samurai like Tanaka Genzo adapted to the new era. Genzo later learned English and became a trader, sending his son Taro to Keio University. Taro later became a diplomat and contributed to concluding the Anglo-Japanese alliance. 50 years after relinquishing his sword, elderly Genzo told his grandson, "That day we certainly lost something, but at the same time we gained a new Japan. By abandoning swords, we may have found true strength." Internationally, the Haitorei was highly evaluated as a policy symbolizing Japan's modernization. British diplomat Ernest Satow wrote in his report to London, "Japan has completely escaped feudalism and walks the path to true civilization." This evaluation would later contribute to treaty revision.
Ending.
150 years have passed. No one in Japan carries swords daily anymore. But the samurai soul thought lost that day continues living in different forms today. The Ichigo Ichi of tea ceremony, the quiet aesthetics of flower arrangement, the courtesy of martial arts, the perfectionism of craftsmen, corporate lifetime employment systems, cultures emphasizing teamwork, the genes of samurai culture live in all these. Tanaka Genzo's great-grandson currently researches Japanese swords in Kyoto. Swords have been reborn not as weapons but as art, he says. The Aizu kanesada my great-grandfather relinquished is now beloved by many in museums. I'm sure great-grandfather would be pleased. The Haitorei certainly ended one era. It stripped 1.4 million samurai of their symbol of pride. But it was simultaneously the beginning of a new Japan. 10:30 a.m., March 28, 1876. Japan changed by a mere 12-character law. Understanding the light and shadow of modern Japan born from the day samurai disappeared may be most important for considering our future. History is never merely past events. It continues flowing in our blood at this very moment.